Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for joining this workshop, the GraphQL Real-Time Race Workshop. My name is Brice Pele, and I will be guiding you through the first session, the first episode, the day one of this workshop. Let me introduce myself real quick. My name is Brice Pele. As I said, I am a principal solution architect at AWS AppSync. So, what is this workshop about? In this workshop, you are going to build a fully functional application for a fast-paced sports event called the GraphQL Real-Time Race. So we'll demonstrate how to create a serverless web application that delivers real-time data to fans based on their location, event scoring, and event updates. By going through this workshop, you'll gain a solid understanding of how to connect your front-end application to a robust, performant, cloud-enabled backend that delivers real-time updates. So we are going to provide all the practical hands-on experience on how to easily create a backend with sophisticated functionality such as GraphQL, subscription for this real-time notifications, and location awareness. We have 5 different labs. As you complete each lab, you'll gain additional knowledge on how to integrate real-time data in your apps. So real-time data is going to be a key part of what we're going to do in all of the different exercises. And we'll walk you through all of those. So your day at the races will increase the speed and fun as you develop your future applications. All right? Hopefully you're excited by all this. Let's get going. So first, let's talk about the agenda. Since this is day one, what we're going to do is review the requirements and objectives. I'll also help you get everything set up so that you're ready to go. We have 5 different labs, and the labs build on top of one another. So as you take a break between your labs, just keep your environments and pick up where you left off. My colleagues and I will help you walk through all of the different exercises. We're also going to talk about the architecture. Of course, we're going to look at what we're going to build. We're going to look at the tools and services. There are several of them that will help walk you through. And of course, we'll look at the code and the discussion. Now, when we talk about code, there's no real coding experience needed here. We are going to provide all the code samples. You don't need to come up with any of the functionality, but hopefully this will inspire you to build on top of what we're doing here and to build some new interesting applications on your side, on your own after the workshop. So like I mentioned, we have 5 different sessions. And in this session, we're going to really just focus on launching your application. So this is a scenario where you're just getting started and you want to launch something. You want to launch a web app, you want to launch some functionality. We're going to focus on that, and we're going to focus on starting to connect your front end with your back end. So what are some of the prerequisites and housekeeping? So this is an AWS workshop, so you're definitely going to need an AWS account with full admin access. We're going to be working with a lot of different services. So you're going to need a variety of permissions, and having admin access in a sandbox, in a demo account, in an account that you control is best for what we're going to do here. We recommend using one of the supported regions. In this workshop, you'll primarily see us use US East 2. It might be easier to follow along in the same region, but you can work in any of the regions where these services are supported. You need a bit of familiarity with the AWS Management Console. We're going to be in there quite a bit. If you're not super familiar, don't worry about it. We're going to guide you through it. And what you really need once you've got your AWS account, all you really need is a compatible web browser. So Chrome and Firefox is what we recommend to use for this. And like I said, all of the sessions build on the previous sessions, so don't delete your environment, don't delete your work. We're just going to build on top of this. The majority of the services that we're going to use are serverless. So, in terms of cost, it's really pay as you go. And there are not a ton of costs, but you may incur some small charges here and there. So, let's keep an eye on that. And at the end of the workshop, we provide some instructions and guidance on how to remove any of the resources that we are going to create. Okay. So let's look at some of the tools and services that we are going to use throughout the whole workshop. Now, as I said, there's quite a few of them, and we can separate them in three different areas. The first thing is we're going to use an IDE for this. When I said that all you need is your browser, I really meant that. All you need is your browser. We're going to use Cloud9, which is an integrated web IDE. So you don't need to bring anything else. We're going to work directly from your browser in a Cloud9 environment that provides a terminal and an IDE. So that's all you need. We're going to make heavy use of AWS Amplify. AWS Amplify is a set of tools, frameworks, and libraries that is going to help us not only define our infrastructure, but deploy it and then connect our applications to it. And then there's going to be a slew of services that we're going to use in our backend. As you can see them here. Most of these services, actually all of these services are serverless. So it's going to be really easy to set them up and to get them configured. And as we dive into each one of the workshops, we'll spend a bit of time talking about how each one of these are used. Okay, so let's talk specifically about what we are going to build in this first lab. As I mentioned, we are going to focus on launching your application. So we're going to use our IDE. We're going to use AWS Amplify. And then in the backend, we're going to use AppSync. We'll talk at length about AppSync in this workshop. AppSync provides a managed GraphQL service. So by using AppSync, you can actually provision a GraphQL endpoint and allow your applications to connect to that endpoint and to access a variety of data sources in and out of your account. We're going to use Amazon Cognito to allow our users to sign in and sign up for our application. And we're going to use DynamoDB. DynamoDB is going to be our main source of truth. We're going to use that to store and save our information. Okay, so to do this workshop, we are going to use a set of instructions. And you can see a link to a website here, Amplify AppSync Realtime Race.workshop.aws. All of the information that you need to accomplish this workshop is available on this website. It's available now, and it will be available after the workshop, so you can go back to it if you want to repeat the workshop, or if you want to share it with anybody that is interested in running the workshop. So what I suggest we do now is actually jump into the workshop. Okay, so here we are. So I went to the URL that I just showed. The Amplify AppSync Real-Time Race Workshop. So this is where you can find all of the information about the workshop. So let's get started. As I mentioned, the first thing you're going to need is an AWS account, and I've got my AWS account set up here. As you can see, I am operating in US East 2. So let's look at the navigation, and I can expand this. It looks pretty good in mobile format, but if you need more space, you can expand this as well. First, let's get started with our prerequisites. So you can take some time to look at this. The prerequisite section is just going to help you set up everything you need for the workshop. As I mentioned, most of the services that we're going to use here, if you're using a new account or if you're new to AWS, a lot of these services are available as part of the free tier. But as I mentioned, there may be a couple of charges that you incur. So what I definitely recommend when you are done with the entirety of the workshop, check out the cleanup section that is right here. Go to it, and it will show you how to get rid of all of the resources that you have set up. One of the things to mention about the workshop and this guide is we are going to share a good amount of code. And so to make the pages manageable, some of the code is I would say hidden onto pages. So when you see these blinking stars, just make sure you expand the section under the blinking star, because there's going to be some code available there. Okay, so with that being said, you should have set up an AWS account, right? So this is the first thing you should do. If you don't have one now, take some time, pause this video, and go and set up an AWS account. Now, we're going to use Cloud9 to do this. This is the recommendation of running this, recommended way of running this workshop. But if for some reason you don't want to use Cloud9, or you want to use your own environment, please feel free to do so. There's no hard requirement, but using Cloud9 just makes it really easy. So let's go ahead and set up a Cloud9 environment. So I'm going to go to the Cloud9 web console, and I can do this easily by going here and searching for Cloud9. Okay, I'm going to create an environment. We follow the guidelines here. US East 2, yes, I'm in US East 2, which is Ohio. I'm going to select this, create the name. You don't have to provide a description. I'm going to select M5 large as my type. This will give us a good size to run our application. And I'm going to click next steps. You don't have to worry about the rest of the details here. And I'm going to click create an environment. So Cloud9 is going to be configured and set up so that we can use it as a terminal. While that is going on, let me talk just a little bit about Cloud9 if you are not familiar with what it is and how it works. I take a little bit. What's going on in the back here is that Cloud9 is setting up an EC2 instance. So Cloud9 is essentially IDE, an integrated development environment for writing, running, and debugging your code. It is a fully featured cloud-based IDE on managed EC2 instance. So once you set it up, it deploys an EC2 instance for you in your VPC, which is this instance is pre-configured to work as a Cloud9 editor. It provides a set of integrated tools for serverless deployment. So that's in development. So that's pretty useful as well. It has a built-in terminal and temp space. And so the really interesting thing about Cloud9 is all you need is your browser, right? So if you're looking to implement something in AWS, if you're looking to have a shared environment where you can collaborate with other folks, Cloud9 is a good tool to use. Okay, so I can see here that my Cloud9 environment has finished setup. So we can look at the information here, and what we're going to do real quick is just configure it. So we want to get rid of some of this window here we don't need. This is just kind of a welcome screen that you can use if you're getting started. We do want a terminal, so I'm going to open that. And there's a couple of different things that you can use, preferences that you can set in Cloud9. So I'm going to go and do that right now. I'm just going to open the preferences. I'm going to go to user settings. There's one particular thing that I want to turn off let's go down here. Let me see if I can find this. Okay, hints and warnings. I want to turn this off. And then you can also configure the user interface if you need to. So this is more of a preference thing. One of the things that I'm going to try to do is change the font size. It might make it a bit easier for folks to read. You don't have to do this on your side, but I'm going to increase the font size, and I increased it to 16. I'm going to increase the font size to 16 here. So print working directory. Hopefully you can see this. This is a fairly large. And then let's see, the other thing you can just change is the font and let's see if we can change. Anything else we want to change here? Nope, I think that's it. Let me see, terminal. Okay, this looks pretty good. All right, so we've got the Cloud9 set up. Now we've got our workspace. I'm going to close this. We don't really need this either. Now the other thing that you can do, you can select your preferred theme by selecting View Themes at the Cloud Space workspace menu. So let me show you how to do that real quick. I'm going to go to themes, and let's see, I'm going to do classic dark. Okay, and I'm going to do what else? Monokai as the editor theme. Okay, so this is what we're going to use here. All right, one step to do here, I would recommend to do it, is to increase the size of the drive that was set up for your Cloud9 environment. The default size is 10 gigabytes. Now, because we are going to install some dependencies, sometimes the 10 gigabytes is not enough. So to do that, let's follow the instructions here. We've got our resize.sh file here, and the code is provided. What this file is going to do is essentially interact with the AWS service to modify the volume and to increase the size. So we are going to increase the size to 20 gigabytes. So to do that, I'm just going to copy this here. I'm going to go here. I'm going to say new file, provide the name, go in here, select this, and I'm going to paste this code. Then I'm going to save it. Let me go back to the instructions, and then all I have to do is run the code. Okay, so it's running. It's going to modify the volume. Okay, awesome. And we are set. Note that this is not something that you can do over and over again. There is some limitation to how often you can modify the volume. So this is something you'll want to do once. So make sure that you modify it to the size you want. But running the script with the defaults is good enough for this lab. Okay, let's install some dependencies. We are going to use Node.js quite a bit. We are going to use JavaScript and some TypeScript. So let's make sure that we install that. So we're installing Node. We're using NVM to install Node version 14. Let's install Yarn as well. We're going to use Yarn. We're going to build a React app. So we're going to use that as our package manager. And then let's install some dependencies like tree and JQ. Those can be pretty useful when if we need to debug something. Okay, so that's done. And I love the fact that this is just going on into ID. We don't really have to do much of anything. And then the part, if you're using the Cloud9 editor, you can skip this part. This is the AWS CLI. If I type this here, you'll see that the AWS CLI is already installed. The next thing we definitely want to do is install the Amplify CLI. As I mentioned, we're going to use the Amplify CLI quite a bit, so we need to install that. And so this may take a couple of minutes, but let's just let that do what it's doing. It's pulling in all of the dependencies, and then when that's done, we'll be able to use the Amplify CLI to interact with our projects. Now, what we want to do when this is done installing is we're going to want to configure the Amplify CLI. And so the Amplify CLI will allow you to, will walk us through the step to configure this. And that's one of the great things about the Amplify CLI. It walks you through the steps, right? So if you don't know something, typically the Amplify CLI will help you configure it by asking you a series of questions. And just by walking through the prompt, you can configure it pretty easily. Okay. All right, so that's done. So now, and you can see we have this clipboard icon here. So anytime you want to copy paste something, you can just click it. So configure the Amplify CLI. Okay, just follow the prompt. So it wants us to go to the IAM console. So I'm going to say US East 2, and it's going to guide us on how to create a new user. So you can go with the default name or provide another name. I'm going to go with the default. And then I'm going to click this link, and I'm going to say open. And this link is simply going to take me to the IAM console and help me configure my user. As you can see, we're configuring it with administrator access. And again, we're using administrator access here for this demo. In real life production scenarios, you may not want to do Amplify. You may not want to do administrator access. So just keep that in mind. And then we create a user. And I'm going to leave the screen open here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the access ID, go here, paste it here. I'm going to show and copy the secret access key. Copy it here. Name the profile default, and that's it. Keep this open because you may need this again in some next steps. So either make sure you keep this information. You can download the CSV. Be aware that this is only available on this screen. Should you leave the screen, this information would no longer be available. Okay. So now that we've got all this set up, we can actually get started to launch our app. The first thing we're going to do here is we want to deploy a React application. So we're going to use the Create React App tool to create our new application. So we can typically use the command line tool with Yarn to create it. So copy it here. Let's go back to Cloud9. And just from the environment folder, by the way, is the default folder that you get into if you open Cloud9. So it just takes you to environment. So from here, I'm just going to paste the command, and it's going to create a new app. And we are going to spend all of our time during this lab in the GraphQL real-time race folder. This is where everything is going to happen. Okay, so it's downloading the package, downloading all of the dependencies, and this can take a little bit, but let's just let it run its course and do what it needs to do. Okay, awesome. So we used the command to create a new React application, and we're using TypeScript as our template. So we're going to use TypeScript for this. Let's go back to the instructions. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is simply switch to the directory and do yarn start. So yarn start is going to start our development server. So this is great to use if you're just developing stuff. You can just run it here directly. And so one of the other cool things about Cloud9, I can just preview the application here. I can see preview running application. And Cloud9 is smart enough to figure out that there's an application running, and I can preview it in browser. Or if I want to, I can just tell it to open it in a larger, in a separate tab. But it's kind of cool that you can see it here. That way you can easily edit code and see the changes on the same screen. Okay, now, the next thing you want to do here is create the shell for the application. And so we provide a zip file with all of the code that you need to get started. So what you should do here is just copy the link address to this, go back to Cloud9. So let me just open a new terminal. Let me go into my GraphQL folder, and I'm just going to do wget to download the file. So let's see if it's here. So you can see the lab start zip, and then all I need to do is unzip the file, and then I can remove the zip. I won't need it after this. So let me just do that. So that's done. And you can see that because we're running the development server, it's automatically catching the differences. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we need here. So we need to run a yarn install because we added a whole new package.json file with a whole bunch of dependencies. So let's run yarn install. And then because there's quite a few changes, we're going to want to stop the server. And when we're done installing all of these dependencies, we'll start the server again. Okay. Let me close some of these tabs because I don't need them. Alrighty. And I think what I want to do here now is yarn start. That's really the first step. But this really important step is setting up the application. And then as you build on top of this workshop, you're really going to be working within the shell, this shell, right? So you'll be able to work within the shell and work on the different pages of your application. So starting the development server. Okay, here we go. Let's refresh this. And here we are. This is the website, right? So I'm looking at all this in Cloud9. We've got a couple of pages here. So for each of the different pages, as you move through the workshop, each of the different session focuses on one of these pages. So this is going to be pretty cool. You're going to just implement different functionality on all of these pages. As you can see for now, they are blank. Okay, let's move to the next part of our lab. This is managing events with data store. So we've got a blank application. What we want to do is we want to be able to show the list of events for our GraphQL real-time race, right? We have an application that fans are using, and they want to be able to use the application to see the different events that are going on next to them or that are upcoming so that they can see what's going on. Because this is a brand new implementation, we are going to use data store. And we're going to use data store to easily configure a new application backend. We are also going to use the Amplify admin UI to do that. If you're not familiar with data store, Amplify Data Store really provides a programming model for leveraging shared and distributed data without writing additional code. So when you use data store, you can just easily think about the local model. You just think about the local model and how your application interacts with the data, and you don't really think about how your application then synchronizes that data with the backend. Because you can just focus on the local model, it makes it really easy to just implement what your users need without having to think about all of the extra stuff that needs to be done to implement a robust framework that communicates and handles the faults that could happen when talking to a backend. So to implement this first part, to implement our events page, which is what we're going to be focusing on here, we are going to use the Amplify admin UI. To do this, I am going to go here. I'm going to look in here, and I am going to look for Amplify, and I'm going to open this in a new window. So as I go here, I am going to click all apps because I want to see what's going on. And I'm going to click new app, and I'm going to click create app backend. And what do I want to name this? I want to name it GraphQL real-time race. So this is essentially the name we're using across the board. So I'm GraphQL real-time race, confirm deployment. Okay, this is going to take a bit of time to deploy the resources for the admin UI. But when it's deployed, we'll take a look at that. It's going to make it really easy to interact with our resources. So while that is going on, let me take just a few seconds to talk about Amplify. So Amplify is a number of things. It's a set of tools and services that support your implementation across your various life cycles, right? Amplify makes it easy for developers to not only develop their applications, but it also makes it easy to deliver their application and then to manage resources over time, right? Because a lot of times you start with development, but then you got to think about, well, how do I take this web application to production? And then once it's in production, how do I manage the data that is actually being used in that application? So Amplify provides a number of tools to do that. When you look at Amplify, it's actually a series of things. There's the Amplify libraries. The libraries allows you to connect your application to resources into cloud. We've got the Amplify CLI. This is what we installed in Cloud 9. The Amplify CLI allows you to actually configure and deploy backend resources in your AWS environment. So typically that will be the first step. Use the CLI to deploy your resources into cloud. Then you use the libraries to connect your application to those resources into cloud. Typically, another step is going to be to deliver your application, right? You're going to want to deploy your web application. This is where the Amplify console comes in as well. You can use the Amplify console, which is a specialized CI/CD tool to configure how your application should be deployed into cloud. You can set up CI/CD where it's automatically triggered when you change your code, when you check in your code, and you can specify multiple branches that you monitor, and you can specify custom domains that you want to use each time you deploy some code. One of the things that we'll be looking at specifically is the admin UI. The admin UI is a UI interface that does a lot of the same work that the CLI does, but more. It builds on top of what you would typically do in the CLI, and kind of gives you this visual interface to allow you to easily do your work. So a good number of tools to help you implement quicker and make your life easier. All right, so if I go back to the screen here, you can see that the admin UI configuration has completed. Now, there's a couple of things that you see here. You see we are in a staging environment. This is our backend screen. We're in a staging environment. And you see a link to open to admin UI. So we're just going to click on that. And it's going to open to admin UI in a new window. So the admin UI is an interface that allows you to manage your data, manage your users, to set up authentication, to create your models. One of the cool things about the admin UI is you actually don't need an AWS account to access the admin UI. You can manage access to the admin UI, and you can send out invitations to your team members, and then your team members can simply log in to the admin UI using the account that you provision for them. So makes it easier for a set of users that don't all need access to AWS to interact with the admin UI. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to want to do here is to create a new model. And so for that, we're going to set up some data. Let's go here, and we are going to create a model. So I'm going to do add model, and I'm going to follow the steps that are on the guide. So we want to create a new model called event, and we are going to configure all of these fields here. So let me do that. So start with a title, add a date, add description. Oops, let me make sure I write that properly. Add hearts. I wonder what that's about. Add thumbs up, and add happy. Okay, now what we want to make sure is that we set the proper types for these fields. So title is string, date is AWS date time, description is string, heart is int, thumbs up is hint, and happy is hint as well. Okay, I think that's good. And then just pay attention to this. So again, we need to make sure that some of these fields are specified as required. So to do that, I'm going to go to title. Title is required. So I'm going to mark it as required, date as required, and description as required. Okay, awesome. Okay, and I think I'm going to double check this information. ID, title, date, description, all required, heart, thumbs up, happy, and I am going to save and deploy. Okay, deploy. Okay, so what's going on here is that the admin UI is going to start provisioning our data, not provisioning, but configuring our data model that we will be interacting with. So it's going to provision this event data model for us. It's going to deploy to resources. It's in our account. So the good thing here is that while working with the admin UI, now there's of course a set of resources that are being configured, that are being deployed, but it allows us to really focus on the data model. At the end of the day, what we really want to be able to do is interact with our data, and so the admin UI makes it easy to do that. So this is taking it's going to take a bit of time to do it. You can see here that it's using it's actually using a CloudFormation template and stack in the back to deploy our changes. So you can track all of this, everything that's going on here. But once this is ready, we'll see a notification on the screen. Also, if you go in, you can also see some of this. If you go to your GraphQL real-time race into Amplify console itself, you'll see some of the different steps that are being executed, and you'll see the resources that are being provisioned. So if that's of interest, you can do that as well. And you can view details, clone, or delete. We definitely don't want to delete right now. Okay, so let's wait for that to complete. And then one of the things that you'll see is we're configuring our data into admin UI, but we'll see how we can actually connect what is going on into admin UI to Amplify CLI that we created, and how we can connect what we're doing into CLI to what is going on with the admin UI. I'm going to copy this information because I mentioned we might need it later. Okay, so seems like our data model has been deployed. Let's see what's next in our steps. So let's click on content here. And as you can see, not only does the admin UI allows us to define a model, we can actually then create content directly from the admin UI. So let's say I'm going to create, this is the first racing event of the season. Specify a date, say that it's happening today. I don't know, at 15, this is 3 p.m. Now I'm just going to enter a plain text here, but if you wanted to have markdown, you could also do this, right? So this is pretty cool. But I'm just going to have a simple description, and I'm going to add some these are, and we'll see what that is in a little bit. So this is it, and I saved my event. And I've got an event created just like that. So I didn't have to go anywhere. I was able to create an event. Okay, now let's see how we can connect our client. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to pull the changes or pull this configuration to our application. And we're going to do this for Amplify Pull. So you'll see some instruction here on how to pull your application to pull this Amplify application into your own web application. So you can definitely use this method. Because we are working in Cloud9, and Cloud9 doesn't necessarily, with Cloud9, you cannot necessarily use that method because there's a bunch of redirects that would be required that we cannot do within the Cloud9 terminal. But you can easily do this by just doing Amplify Pull. You can see the instructions here. Now, I'm doing an Amplify Pull, and it's going to ask me for my credentials again. And so what I'm going to do here, specifically for Cloud9, I'm going to provide my access keys directly. And the reason for that is because this is a managed EC2 instance, and EC2 is managing the keys. So it may overwrite my keys because it's an EC2 instance. This would not happen if you were running on your own environment. Because I haven't provisioned this EC2 instance with the permissions to do work on Cloud9, I'm going to want to use my own keys that were my own credentials that were set up when we created our user. So let me do that. I'm just providing the same credential information that I did earlier. Okay, and don't forget to set the region. Again, we're working in US East 2, and you can see now that I've provided my information, it can actually query or Amplify service and find out the application that we're working on. So I'm just going to say select it. You can select your favorite editor. Because we're in Cloud9, I'm going to select Vim, select JavaScript. It's a React application. So you can see through the walkthrough here that the command line actually tries to configure the application by asking us a series of questions. And most of the time, it's really smart. It kind of knows what's going on and guesses based on the files that are in our application folder. Do you plan on modifying this backend? Let's click yes. And now we have our application set up. And you can see that it's connected. So I'm just kind of expanding here. You can see that one of the things that it did is it imported this AWS exports file. The AWS exports file has all of the information needed to connect to the resources in our Amplify application. So that's awesome. The next thing I want to do here is configure my code gen. So I'm going to we're going to use essentially AppSync to interact with our data via data store. So we don't need to know much about AppSync here, but the main thing is that we need to make sure that our CodeGen has run in our folder so that we can actually use some of the models that it's going to auto-generate. So let's look at the guides here. So the language target, again, is going to be TypeScript because we are running in a TypeScript application. And you can follow the directions here. I'm going to follow them as well. So the file name pattern, it's GraphQL .ts. Do you want to generate all possible GraphQL operations? Yes. The maximum depth, 2 is good for what we're trying to do. We want to create API TS. And do we want to create generate code for your newly created GraphQL API? Yes. And so it generates the code. And as you can see here, it did a couple of things. It generates a whole bunch of code for our queries. We won't really be using those now, but we'll use those later. More importantly, it creates models. The models are the models that represent the model that we created in the Amplify admin UI. So for example, if I take a quick look at here, you can see that we have an event that model that's been created based on the schema that we have that was provided by Amplify. Okay, now to use this configuration, the next thing that we want to do is essentially just go in source.app.tsx, which is right here. And at the end of the imports, we want to simply import Amplify, which is our Amplify libraries that were installed when we did yarn install. And we want to import the config from our AWS exports file. And then we simply want to tell, well, configure Amplify with this configuration. So now when we try to use connect to resources using Amplify, Amplify will know how to connect to those resources. And the next thing we want to do is simply update our page.events.tsx. As I mentioned, we're going to focus on this events page. So I can click the code, and you can see that I expanded here. There's a blinking star, so I want to make sure that I expand to code. Click onto code, go to pages, go to events, and I'm simply going to replace the code that's there. Okay. Now, as I do that, let me expand this a little bit. If we go here, you'll see that it's recompiling our code. So let me try to refresh this page. Actually, it refreshed by itself. And you can see that it automatically pulled in. This is the first event, first racing event of the season. I'm looking forward to this event. And you can see that it has, this is what it was, right? The heart, the thumbs up, and the smiley face. It's actually representing, we actually pulled the data that we configured into admin UI, and we are showing it here. So that's pretty cool. We can take a couple of seconds to look at the code and to see what's going on. So you can see that we're using data store. And what we're doing is fairly simple. We're just saying, hey, data store, pull in the events. And then we're setting our events. And we sort them by date. There's only one event for now. And we also ask data store to observe changes to our events. So if anything changes, it will automatically update our set of events and show it here. And to kind of simulate how this would work, let me go back to the Amplify admin UI. Let me go here. And let me update our hearts to a new number, like 99, like something that's really different. And I do save event. And I go back to my screen, and you see 99, right? Okay. And maybe let me try to do this off screen so that it actually is easier to see. So I've got 99 here. So I go off screen, I'm going to change this to 105 and just pay attention to what's going on here. I'm going to do save event, and you can see that it's automatically updated to 105. So that's one of the benefits of using Data Store. It automatically synchronizes data and displays changes to models regardless of where they occur. So I can also go in here and I can change data directly here as well, right? So I'm incrementing the count. And if I were to go back in my UI here and just refresh the screen, you'll see that they've been incremented here as well, right? So the changes that we are making here, are stored in our backend and can be reflected across multiple clients. So that's pretty cool. Okay, let's see here. Now, another cool admin UI feature, one thing that I really like is we can auto-generate data. This is really good when you're getting started and you don't have a ton of data, but you want to kind of see how things would look in your UI. So let me say we're going to create 20 rows of data. And you can also add constraints and stuff like that if you want your generated data to look a specific type of way. We're not going to do that. I'm just going to click generate data. I'm going to do that off screen so you can see what happens in the UI. So let me do that. Auto generate data. I'm going to create 20, and now say I do generate data. And as soon as I do that, you can see that they're all being reflected here. Now, I'm not doing any polling. This is being done automatically by Data Store. Data Store is setting up subscriptions using GraphQL, and it is automatically creating, automatically being notified of the changes that are going on. So this is some of the real-time stuff that we've been talking about. And if you had multiple clients looking at the data, as soon as anybody interacts with the data, this is also being reflected in real time across multiple clients. So that is pretty cool. Okay, let's move on to the next part. Now, this is awesome, but this doesn't let users have their own specific view. One of the things that we want to do is add authentication so that we can let users authenticate to the app and take actions that are specific to them, right? So we can also do that easily in the admin UI. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so let's follow the directions here for authentication. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to remove email. I'm going to add a login mechanism to just use username. And then I'm going to say, well, the email is mandatory. And then I'm going to click Save and Deploy. Okay, so I'm going to deploy those changes. So this is going to deploy an Amazon Cognito user pool resource for us, and we're going to be able to use that to authenticate our users. And if you're not familiar with Amazon Cognito User Pool, so it's a managed service that provides a fully managed application identity. So you can use Amazon Cognito pools, Amazon Cognito in multiple ways. If you use Amazon Cognito User Pool, you can use that to authenticate your users into your application, right? So a lot of times you start creating an application and you're going to have users and you want to make sure that your users authenticate before gaining access to resources. You can do that with Amazon Cognito User Pool. Once you've authenticated your users with Amazon Cognito User Pool, it returns you a set of tokens. And you can use those tokens to interact with different services on AWS, AppSync or API Gateway, even Amazon ALB or AWS Lambda, by simply using the tokens, the access tokens that are returned once you've signed in with Cognito User Pool. You can also use these tokens to exchange them for AWS credentials using Amazon Cognito identity pools. So let's say you have a scenario, which we'll actually see later on in one of our labs, where you want to interact with an S3 resource. Well, S3 only works with AWS credentials. So you cannot use tokens to access S3 resources, but you can use your tokens and exchange them to get credentials that then give you scoped permissions to access certain resources on AWS. So Cognito is a really flexible tool one of the awesome things about it is that it's fully managed. So you don't have to stand up any architecture or infrastructure to make use of it. You simply configure it how you want to, and then you make use of it. Now, the great thing here is that with the admin UI and with Amplify, Amplify is just going to use our requirements. Like we said, we wanted to use a username, and we want to make sure that users are provided email address. Amplify is going to take those inputs and use best practices to configure an Amazon Cognito user pool and identity pool in our behalf. So we don't have to be an expert in how Amazon Cognito works to make use of it. Once that's deployed, we'll do another Amplify pool. So as you can see the pattern here, we can go into admin UI, configure the resources, deploy resources, change our resources, and when we want to make use of it in our application, all we need to do is an Amplify pool to get the latest configuration information. Okay, so it looks like we're about ready. Now here's another cool thing. I've configured my information. First, let's do Amplify pool. Let's go back into Cloud9. This is our application. I need to refresh this because we changed a whole bunch of things. Let's go back into Cloud9. Let me find my screen here, and I'm going to do another Amplify pool. Okay. So you can see that now we have an auth resource. We first had only an API resource. Now we have an API resource and an auth resource. And if you look at the AWS exports file, it's actually been updated with some information. Okay, so we've done that. Let's update our application to actually make use of this and to make sure that our users sign up. So if I refresh the screen right now, even though we've got that configured and Amplify knows of this configuration, we haven't set up our application to actually require authentication. So I'm just going to copy this code. I'm going to go to app.tsx, make this a bit bigger, make this slightly smaller, and I'm going to change the code. So the main thing that you'll see, the main difference here is that we are wrapping our application. So this is our application functional component that we are returning, but we are wrapping it into a higher order component. This is a with authenticator component that is being provided by the Amplify UI React library. And what this does is it provides a default implementation that requires all of our users to sign in before they get access to the application. So let me save this. All changes saved. This might take a little bit for the changes to compile. But what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to refresh it. And now you see that I have to sign in. I can't access anything until I've signed in. So I need a user. Well, I can easily do that. I can easily provision a user again by using the admin UI. So here we can follow the directions again. We can visit the user management page into admin UI, and I can create a user. So I'm just going to create a user. Contact option for verification. Just going to use a dummy email address and create a password. And now I create the user. So I've got the user. So now that I've got this, I can go in here and sign in with that user. Oop, incorrect password. Let me make sure I've got the correct one. Okay, so I do have to change my password. So I create a new password, change it, and then you can optionally verify your contact information, but I'm going to skip that for now. So now we've got access, right? So if I go here and I refresh this page, you can see that I've got access to the information. And I can also sign out, right? So come back here, I don't have access to the application. Again, I can come back. Hopefully I remember my password. Sign in, skip this. Awesome. Okay, so now we have users. We've added authentication to our app. So the next thing we are going to want to do here is add some user-specific data. So to do that, let me go back to my admin UI, and I'm going to follow the steps that are here. We're going to go into data. I'm going to change my authentication type to use a Cognito user pool, right? So now I want to use Cognito user pool to authorize my request. I want to add a model. The model is called start event. The main field that I want to add is owner. It's string, nothing required. And check this out. I want to add a relationship between my event and a start event. So a start event is essentially going to keep track of an event that individual users are starting, right? So if I have an event in my app and I want to star it just to mark it as something that I like, I can do that. So I want to add a relationship to my event, and it's a one-to-one relationship, right? So one start event can point to one event, right? And you can have multiple start event, but it's a one-to-one relationship. Okay, let's make sure everything looks correct. Okay, then we want to set some rules. Okay, so we're creating this start event, but we got to make sure that only owner, as you can see here, only the owner of this resource has access to it. And so to do that, we're going to set up some rules. So I do add a new rule for owners. And here I'm going to essentially say that an owner, a Cognito, somebody that's signed in via Cognito user pool, can create, read, update, and delete a start event, right? Just the owner, nobody else. Now for the events themselves, we want everybody to be able to read them. So I add a rule that says any signed in user can read it, right? So any signed in user can read can see the events. They can't modify them. Can read the event, and then a start user can view all of his start event and can create them. And I think here what we probably want to do is update as well. Let me click on update because we do want to be able to like these events, right? We don't want to be able to create and delete some new ones, but we want to be able to like them. Okay, awesome. So now that that's done, let's save and deploy these changes. And deploy. Okay, so this is going to take a bit of time. We're essentially creating a new model, changing the authorization mode on our API that data store is using, so that only Cognito users can see this information, and only specific owners of start event can view the information. And what I'm going to do is, okay, I think my session has expired, so give me a second. I'm going to log in again. Now, the cool thing is, because this is running into cloud, this doesn't really matter. Everything is still going on. Nothing has changed. If I refresh here, my application is still running. This is running on EC2. The EC2 instance itself didn't stop. The only thing that happened was that I got logged out because my session expired. But if I refresh my screens here, everything should still be working. Okay, and this is still being deployed. I don't need the screen anymore. So as you can see, my changes are being pushed out. I have some off changes that are being pushed out as well. We'll wait for that to complete. And then let's let that keep on going. Okay, I think this is about done. Let's go to admin UI. What we're going to do as soon as this is done, we're going to do another pull to pull in our changes. We're doing all of our configuration and all of our changes to our models, to our authorization into console. We can pull. So now we've got this set up. We've got my events. So let me go back into Cloud9, and I'm going to do the Amplify pull. Again, I go into my console. And do Amplify pull. And it pulls in all of my information. Now let's double check something. You can also see that it automatically generated our models again. So I've got my model here. Okay, so now I want to update my events page. So I'm going to click the code. And what we want to do here is pull in our start events and allow users to see our start events. So some of the changes that you can see, before we were only getting events. Now we're also getting start events for specific events, right? So we're querying for start events, and then we're also observing changes to event and start events, right? So anytime something changes, we do want it to be reflected, right? So we're getting all of that information. Okay, so this has been refreshed. Let's see. You refresh the screen just to make sure. I go into events. Okay, and then what you can see here is that now I have this. I have these start events. And I can like these events. And these are specific to each user. So what we're going to do now, so each user can update this. Everybody can update this because I said any logged in user can update this information. But these are only specific to each user. So the next step in our lab is to actually deploy the application. And so we're going to add hosting to deploy the application. And this will allow us to actually create some additional users and see how this works for multiple users. So let's do that. Let's do Amplify add hosting. Now with Amplify, you can host either using the Amplify console or with using S3. So we want to use Amplify S3. This is managed hosting with custom domains and continuous deployment. So if you had a GitHub repo where this code was checked in, you could actually use the continuous deployment, where every time you check in something on a branch that's being monitored, it would trigger a build and then deploy it. Because we're just working in a local environment, we're just going to do the manual deployment. But keep in mind that if you had a Git repository, you can use a Git-based workflow to deploy your changes. So let's do manual deployment. And now that that's done, I can do Amplify publish. Copy paste this from here. Okay, and so what the Amplify publish is going to do, it's going to build our application locally. So it's going to run yarn build. It's going to package the application. You just confirm this. It's going to package the application in a zip file, and then it's just going to push it to the Amplify console. And the Amplify console is going to deploy it for us. So the first step here is to set up our Amplify console resource to host this application. Once it's done that, it's then going to build everything and deploy it. Now, how fast this goes obviously depends on your machine and the machine size. So this can take more or less time depending on how powerful your machine is. But looks like it's just about done. You don't have to worry about these warnings for this workshop. It's the TypeScript warning. Okay, awesome. Just about done. I created the optimized build for our React application, and now it's deploying the artifacts to the Amplify console. Okay, and you can see it here. We can actually click on this link. Let's click on open. And here's our application. Now, can I log in with the same user? You can see that it's using a default domain, amplifyapp.com. Can I log in with this user here? Try that. Skip. And yes, I'm logged in. Can I see the events? Yes, I see the event, and I see my start event. So this is awesome. Now, let's try something real quick. Let's go back to Amplify admin, and let's create a new user. Name this user John because I can't think of a better name. Let me find an email address that I have to use. We don't really need the email address because we're not going to verify anybody, but just provide one here. And provide a default password. Make sure I remember this password. Okay. So I create a user. All right. So now let me do this. So we've got, and what I'm going to do is actually, to avoid any issues, I'm going to create a new incognito window. Okay, awesome. So this is a completely different environment. I have that here. I've got this one opened here. So this is Blaze. And in this one, I'm going to log in John. Okay. I'm going to skip this. Got my two users here. And as you can see, this event, we're seeing the same events, but we're not seeing the same start status, right? Because stars are specific to each user, right? So that's the big thing. That being said, if I update if I like some of these, you can see that they automatically change in the other person's view. And so these apps are not directly connected, right? One is running here and one is running in incognito mode. But by using data store is just monitoring the application, and our backend is automatically pushing changes to this application, right? So we can actually see these in real time. We don't have to poll. There's no refreshing going on. It's super efficient. And if the application goes offline and comes back online, it automatically catches those changes. And we can see that by actually running a quick test. So let me do that here. I'm going to go to network, and I am going to do network. I'm going to do go offline. So for this first one here, you can see that I have 20 likes. I'm going to increase that to 22. Okay, awesome. And I didn't get those here because I'm offline. But as soon as I come back off online, it's automatic. I synchronize, I get that data back. So data store does that automatically. My application does it, but I did not implement this functionality. Data store monitors the network whether it's connected or not, and take specific synchronization actions depending on what's going on, like when it starts up or when it comes back from being offline. Okay, awesome. The last thing we're going to do here to conclude our lab is a small change. So if you look at this application here, let's see what happens if I refresh the screen. It actually doesn't work. And this is because this is a single page application and it's using internal routing. It's actually using the React Router library to simulate having multiple pages. But really, this is a single application, a single page. So to make sure that these these page changes are handled correctly in a single page application, we need to set up some specific redirects to make sure that when we go to something like /events, it actually sends the request to my index.html file, which will then appropriately show us what's going on the events page. All right, so to do that, let me go down here. Let me find, I can go here and I can write Amplify console. This is an easy kind of shortcut way to go to the console. Okay, and I want to go to the Amplify console. Puts the link here, so that's nice and easy. There you go. Okay. Now I can go into my rewrites and redirects. I can add one. Now all I have to do here is, we follow these instructions. You see that it tells us create one for index with this source address. And what this is essentially saying is, for any request that comes in that is not for a well-known type of asset, send everything to index.html. So this is typically something that you would want to use for an SPA. And what you can see is going on here is anything that's not like an image or CSS or font or JSON or stuff like that, we want to set it to index.html. So let me copy this, put it here. We said /index.html, and I think that's all I need, right? Okay, so now let's see if this works. So it's been captured. I've got my staging event. So before this was returning an error. Now if I refresh, it actually works, right? So this routing works. If I send this direct link to somebody, they would go directly to the events page. So this is really important to make sure that users get, kind of a good experience when they're using your single page application. Okay, awesome. So that wraps up our session for Lab 1. So during this session, we essentially implemented a data store-based application. We used the admin UI to connect to provision our resources, to deploy our resources, and then we use the Amplify CLI to pull those configuration changes into our application, and we use the Amplify library to connect to those resources. So Amplify made it really easy for us to connect. So this is the end of Lab 1. There is a lot more to come. My colleagues will be on hand for the future labs. I will see you in Lab 2. Thank you very much for joining us today.